Hey everybody, it's Rico, and in this video I'm going to talk about how do taxes really work here in Cyprus and are they really so efficient as many people say and think. In order to provide the best possible experience as well as expertise, I'm actually going to interview my personal consultant, and we are going to talk about the business corporate tax, VAT, NHS, and basically everything you need to know, especially if you want to incorporate a Cyprus limited company. We will share some tips that can help you save up to thousands of euros, and at the end of the video we are also going to talk about the most common mistakes people do. So definitely stick until the end of this video, as it will get very helpful, valuable and interesting. Also along the way I will of course share my experience of living here in Cyprus with two Cyprus limited companies for over 2 years now. So let's grab a coffee, drive to the office of Nicholas, and then we can start with the video. Good morning, Nicholas.
Morning.
I really appreciate your time, especially during these morning early
nice
hours. Nice to see you.
Let's go get some coffee.
Exactly.
Thank you, bye.
Okay, so we arrived at the Hugo co-working space here in Paphos. This is actually also the first place that we met in person before we started working with each other. Before that we talked a little bit on Facebook because I lived in Limassol before, and a lot of people talked about Nicholas and about his business, and then I just sent you a message on Facebook and you were so helpful. I loved it in the beginning. You helped me with many different things, and so I came here, and I'm very happy to have you here today to talk about the Cyprus tax system. And that actually leads me to the first question, and that is, can you just briefly introduce the watchers to the tax system in Cyprus and what people need to be aware of in the first place?
Sure. First of all, let me just say it's also a pleasure to have you here today. So, tax system in Cyprus, this is something that we get a lot of people asking, international entrepreneurs, digital nomads, etc., that they're looking to optimize their taxation. Now, the most important thing that I have to say is that obviously Cyprus is not a tax haven. A lot of people, they think that they can come here and not pay taxes. This is not true. Actually, the taxation in Cyprus can be quite high unless you have non-dom. So for example, tax regime was made this way so that it attracts foreign revenue, right? And in that case, if it's foreign revenue, it's taxed at a less point than the locals. So for example, and we will get into this in more detail later, but for me that I don't have non-dom, it's quite higher than someone such as yourself, where you can get the non-dom tax status, and then it can go quite lower to the point that it makes sense. Actually, Cyprus, especially with the non-dom status, is one of the most favorable tax schemes in Europe, along with a couple of more countries.
Okay, very interesting. Just because when I first decided to live abroad of Germany, there were a lot of different countries that I looked at, and Cyprus was definitely very interesting, not just because of the tax benefits. This was actually a side effect for me because I just love the vibes here, and I love the people and how the people just want to help you and get to know you. So I really like what you just said. And this also leads me to the next question, which is, if someone decides to move here, what are actually the taxes that someone needs to pay, especially for someone with a non-dom status like me?
All right. So first of all, I mean, You don't necessarily need to have a company, but I would say that 99% of the people that move here, they set up a company. It makes things easier than being self-employed. But if you do have a company, effectively the first tax that you have to have in mind is the corporate taxation, which is at 12.5%, which is quite lower than many other countries in Europe, especially the northern part. Now, I have to mention that there is some cases where that can be lowered, but that's also extremely difficult, and it can only happen if you have to deal with intellectual property. But that's a very big subject to go into. So the most important thing to know is that corporate taxation is at 12.5, which is attractive by itself. Then we have we call it VIES. It might be more widely known as NHS, which is the National Healthcare System tax or contribution. It depends on who's paying it, if it's an employer or an employee in a company and such. But the most important thing that matters is actually when you pay dividends. When you pay dividends out, normally if we have, like for myself, we have the defense tax, and then we have the NHS contribution as well. If you get non-dom, you don't need to make any contributions towards defense. In order to get non-dom, effectively you need to be non-domicile or not originating from Cyprus, right? So you, Ricardo, effectively if you were, if you had Cypriot parents or if you had Cypriot grandparents, even if you were born in another country, you wouldn't be able to get it. And the fact that you don't have a Cypriot heritage and now you're moving to Cyprus to bring your revenue and your financial benefit to Cyprus, it exempts you from the defense tax, and then you only need to pay the NHS contributions, which is 2.65. Effectively, this is the two most important parts. So that means if you have a 100,000 euro profit in a company, first it will be deducted 12.5, and on what's left, if you receive it as dividends, an additional 2.65. If you combine these numbers, so if you remove the 2.65 after the 12.5 is deducted, you have an effective taxation of 14.8. Now, it's not only this, of course, but these are the major ones that they scale up with the numbers of your business. You also have smaller things to pay. So, for example, when you pay yourself a salary, you do have the social contributions. Those can vary, but also we do have, for example, in Cyprus, most Cypriots, they contribute towards their holiday fund. It does make, for certain reasons, it's quite a lot, so I don't want to touch into detail with it, but I'll say why it's not worth it for an international client. So, for example, in Cyprus, we pay a holiday fund, then in, let's say in August, that almost everything is shut down, the employer doesn't need to pay a salary towards the employee, and they can go and get it from social insurance. With many international entrepreneurs, we don't find that convenient, so we always try to get an exemption for them so they don't contribute towards the holiday fund. That means they don't need to pay the government and then go back and request to get their money. So they just keep it and they can decide how to use it, right? So these are certain things that we do with social insurance that if someone doesn't know about it, he might end up paying more than normal. And like I said, it depends, the rates can fluctuate. A good average to have in mind is 25%. However, also have in mind, because this is a quite big number, 25% on your salary, you shouldn't be aiming into getting a big salary. You should be aiming to get a smaller salary. This is actually a pro tip. And then obviously you collect your money as dividends and not as a salary. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense financially. Then we do have the VAT, value added tax, and VAT is added on every single transaction that you do. Now, obviously, there are certain things that, because VAT is EU regulated, it's not something that is regulated in each country, it's a centralized. So, for example, in Cyprus is 19%, in other countries it might be another number. But if you're doing, first of all, you only need to start charging VAT once you reach 15,800. Now, it can get a little bit more complicated because the number I just mentioned, the threshold, applies for B2C and outside Europe transactions. But if you do B2B in Europe, not in Cyprus, but in Europe, it means that you need to register from the beginning, right? So then we come down to VIES, which is relative to the VAT. So effectively, VIES is a portal that is provided by European Union. You go there, you input your B2B client VAT number. If the number is valid, then you don't need to charge VAT. You can just write on the invoice subject to the reverse VAT in EU, and then you don't need to charge VAT. Like I said, it's very critical that you do the check every time before you invoice, just to make sure. Obviously, if you have an e-commerce shop, there are systems or plugins or modules, whatever you want to call them, that they automate this process. For example, I can say for FBA clients in Shopify and WooCommerce, there are solutions out there, so that's automated. But if you're doing, let's say, consultancy or I don't know, trading, and then this is relevant to you, then you always need to use VIES. And then last but not least is the personal income tax. There is obviously rates, it's scalable, so let's call them tiers instead. So up to 19,500, your personal income tax is not taxed, okay? In majority of the cases that we have with our clients, almost no one exceeds the 19,500, and the reason is that they choose intentionally to have their salary lower than that, which can also be in good standards. So, you know, it's not a silly salary, it's actually a regular level salary. You don't pay income tax, and then you collect your money as dividends, where you pay the 2.65. Now, just to go a little bit backwards, with the NHS payment on the dividends, there is a maximum cap. So the maximum amount that you can be taxed on that is 180,000, which effectively means that the maximum you would pay into the NHS contribution would be 4,800. Those are rough numbers. I don't have a calculator in front of me.
It's fine.
But yeah. Now, going back to the corporate tax, since we're talking about caps or not, corporate tax doesn't have a cap, so that is on the whole amount. But dividends, maximum amount is 4,800. Like I said, salary threshold is 19,500. As long as you're under that, you don't need to pay any income tax. There are cases where we recommend clients to go above that and pay, and that is if their revenue is extremely high, it doesn't make sense to show a small salary. But this is a sort of a general brief description. Obviously, case by case is different. There is no generic advice, so if anyone is looking to get such an advice, we could sit him down with one of our tax advisors, where they will analyze their personal case and then take it from there and give them personalized advice, not a generic discussion like we have now.
That was very interesting. Thank you very much for that. And from my own experience, I can say, also because you mentioned the specific individual structures where someone wants to pay 0% in taxes, to me personally, this was never interesting. Also because I'm just very happy to have a beautiful country like Cyprus and have some benefits, but I'm not looking into having any dubious structures where I can pay even less, because this is, in my opinion, greedy. I don't know why someone would do that. Of course, some people have intentions that are maybe different than my values, but I find it very interesting that you also mentioned that. And secondly, also, I love to leave my money into the company, actually, just because I want my company to grow. From the beginning, like 2 years ago, I never really paid out myself a big dividend or a big salary. I'm also under the threshold that you mentioned, so I don't tax my personal income, but I also don't pay out myself a big dividend, just because I want to keep my money into the company and scale my business instead of my personal bank account. I think for me personally, also because I'm very young, this can be done in some years, but for now, this was very interesting. And also you mentioned the pro tip, and so let's come to the next topic, and that is some tips for people that want to move to Cyprus. Okay, so as we are going into the handy tips for someone moving to Cyprus, especially also for people wanting to incorporate a company, I wrote down 4 questions that I regularly see in my YouTube comments and that I think resonate with a lot of people that watch this video. And the first question is, can you talk a little bit about buying assets? For example, properties here in Cyprus. Is it better to do it on a company, to do it personally? What do I have to know when I want to buy a real estate house, apartment, whatever?
Okay, all right. Well, this is a relatively easy question. I know it's a very common one, but the quick answer is if you're getting a property that you want to use personally, it's better if you buy it on your person, and if you want to do it as an investment, it's better if you get it on the company. This is very straightforward. But additionally, a very common question that we have in regards to property is not only buying, it's also renting. Because if you rent a property, but then at the same time you're working from it, or some part of your time you're working from home, let's say you have a home office, a certain part of the rent can also go towards your company expenses. Obviously not 100%. So the rationale behind the tax office is the following. If I have a 2-bedroom apartment, right, and I use one of the bedrooms as an office, then maybe I can take a certain percentage of that square meters of the property. It doesn't need to be only the room there, but also, let's say, part of the living room or the kitchen, but let's say on average it would be something between 30 and 40%, where this is then deducted from your company expenses. Even though it counts towards your personal income. So if you have, let's say, a salary of 12,000 euro, and then if you take the 30% of your property, and let's say that's another, for example, 3,000, then it would add up and you would have 15,000 euro of personal income, right? It would still not exceed the threshold, but still is something that can be deducted towards what you pay for the corporate tax. But when it comes to buying, like I said, it's very straightforward. If it's an investment, do it as a company, and if it's personal, do it on your person. Very straightforward. And just the last tip there, also it's very good to find the right professional. If you remember as well, when you were looking, having the right person to assist you is what makes a big difference into finding the right property, whether for personal use or investment from the get-go, and then save up on a lot of hassle later.
Absolutely. Also, in the back end, for the accounting, for example, I remember when I lived in Limassol, I did exactly what you just said. So I had a 3-bedroom apartment, beautiful in Limassol, and one room was only used for my work. It was an office room, and this room specifically I deducted from my corporate tax. So I knew exactly what you just talked about. Now let's come to the next question that I regularly get, and that is also a little bit connected to what we just talked about, and that is the bureaucracy. So when I want to incorporate a company here, what do I need to watch out for here in Cyprus, especially for the accounting part, for the corporation part? Is it fast? Is it slow? Should I do it on my own? Should I do it with someone?
Okay. Well, first of all, let's start about the mindset of Cyprus. In Cyprus, they say siga siga, which directly translates into slowly, slowly, right? This can be a very good thing, and it can also be a frustrating thing. Why? Because being relaxed can lead to a better lifestyle. But also, if you want to do something fast, business-wise, and then it takes time, it can be frustrating. I think the most important thing to understand is that this thing exists here, and it's a very different culture than other countries, let's say Scandinavian countries or Germany or France, etc., right? So you need to have in mind that if you come here, this relaxed culture will become your lifestyle. And I would say that most people love it, but some people also absolutely hate it, right? As long as you understand and you walk into this new culture knowing this, it can help. But to be a bit more specific, so for example, company incorporation will take on average 3 weeks, right? Sometimes it can be a little bit faster, but sometimes it can be quite slower. So for example, now during COVID, because a lot of things are not done, they're not done electronically, but they're not automated, right? So they have a manual process. There is 3 periods in the year where everything gets significantly slower. This is Christmas time, also includes before and after, Easter time, and August. In August, the reason is because of the heat. A lot of the businesses, because we're a very real estate heavy country, all the construction stops. But if all the construction stops, right, then the suppliers of all the construction will stop as well. And then if they stop, their suppliers will stop as well. And also, if you have someone who is in the construction and then his spouse, is in another industry and then they want to go on holiday, then she wants to go on holiday too. So this causes a chain of events where everything virtually shuts down in August, right? And then the only thing that remains open is mostly retail and hospitality. Everything else shuts down. So if you want to incorporate and you start the process mid-July, at end of July, or in August, it could literally take up to 2 months for your company to be incorporated, right? This is not the end of the world, but it's good that you know it in order to make necessary steps. Additionally, this doesn't go only with the company incorporation. This could also be affected with other registrations: immigration, social insurance, VAT number. If you're doing imports and exports, EORI number with the customs office. If you want to get connected your yellow slip with the social insurance in order to be able to register in the healthcare, that as well. Generally, almost anything that has to do with the government, because nothing is automated right now. They are trying now to make a lot of automations, but it's still not there. Currently, very few things have been automated, and only in the recent time. But since everything is manual, things can be slow, and this is very important, and I want to emphasize on it. There is countries out there you can incorporate a company in 1 day or 3 days or 5 days. This is not the case here, and a mistake that I get usually with German clients, they come 2 weeks before Christmas and they say, we want to be ready 1st of January. It's impossible. It's impossible. I remember when we had to do a job for you and we submitted, what was it, 30th of December? And it took specifically 18 days to happen. But then, even though it happened on the 18th days, we found, a week later, we found out, because even though the job was done, we were not notified by the government. So in total, it took 25 days, which normally, if you didn't do it during a holiday season, it would probably be done within 3 to 5 days. So this is very important to know when you start the process. What we recommend the clients is have a chat with us in advance so that we make sure that the timing is right and you don't have any surprises.
Yes. This one scenario that you just mentioned was actually that I waited for a document from the government, because this document was needed for opening a new bank account for one of my companies. And then I waited for this document and the bank was waiting for me. And then I gave them the document. It was a local bank, and it took another 3 weeks until the bank account was finally opened. And if we compare this to a fintech bank account, for example, where you just type in your email and your personal data, and then the longest thing that will take is the KYC. But if this is done, you basically have your online bank account. On the other hand, a local bank account will take literally weeks. Talking about the time, when would you say is the right time for someone coming from a Western European country or from wherever they are? When is the right time to come to Cyprus, especially talking about the calendar year? At the early beginning of the year, at the end of the year, during the year, what should I be aware of when talking about that?
Okay, well, I'll try to talk a little bit about the official side, but also a little bit about the lifestyle. So first of all, generically speaking, it doesn't matter when you move, but I would generally recommend, especially if it's your first time coming to Cyprus, don't come in July and August for two reasons. First of all, it gets hot and you might find it too hot. While if you come earlier and then it slowly, the temperature rises, then you will get used to it. But if you come from a northern country and suddenly you come here and it's 40 degrees Celsius, boom, you feel like, oh my God, it's too hot here, right? So generally, that's a good scenario why you shouldn't come in July or August. Now, specifically when we go calendar year and when we talk tax-wise, in order, first of all, the tax calendar is actually 1st of January to 31st of December in Cyprus. Now, if you want to be a tax resident of Cyprus, you should spend more than 6 months here in Cyprus. Obviously, Cyprus wants and welcomes you. Even if you came in December, they would want you to be a tax resident. However, the country that you're coming from would probably not accept this. So, if someone wants to be a tax resident, he should come, so let's say in this year, he should come between 1st of January or earlier, right? And 30th of June. As long as it's before of the 1st of July and we do the registrations here, then as you carry forward, you know that you will be a tax resident for this year. Now, if you want to move after July and then be a tax resident for next year, that's totally fine. But if you want to be for the current year, you should do it before the 1st of July, right? And then a few things that matter when it comes to incorporation as well. Before and after 1st of July, this is a very relevant date, so basically the half of the year. If you incorporate your company, there is a certain fee that you pay every year to maintain a company. It's called the annual company levy. So if you incorporate after the 1st of July, you are not liable to pay that fee because already half the year has passed. If you do it before, then you have to pay it. Also, it has something to do with the auditing. If you incorporate your company after 1st of July, you don't need to do audit for that year, and you can do the audit for that part of the year with the next one. So you do it combined. If you do it before the 1st of July, you need to do a separate audit for that year, even if it's one day earlier than 1st of July. So effectively, the good point to have is that mid-year matters. If you come before, you can be a tax resident, but also if you incorporate, you have a few additional fees, nothing very high, but still it matters. And if you come after, you don't have the fees, but then effectively you cannot be a registered tax resident here. Once again, it's not that the Cyprus government don't want you, it's that legally, because the other country can claim you. And just as a recommendation, some people, they do it over, let's say, they consider registration being finding a residential property, moving into and getting the utility address, the utility bill as proof of address. However, my recommendation, and to be 100% certain and not to have any issues or any, what is the word I'm looking for, disputes, let's say, of the authenticity of that. Effectively, someone could rent the property before moving to Cyprus, right? So what I recommend for my clients is always getting the residency permit. So residency permit is quite commonly known as yellow slip for Europeans and pink slip for non-Europeans. But the best proof that you can have, like I said, is getting the residency permit, and then you know that you're going forward, you're risk-free when it comes to another country claiming you.
Earlier you mentioned that you have to spend at least 6 months here in Cyprus. Is it 6 months or is it 60 days, so that we can have this myth?
Okay, so there is two things to have in mind. It's where you're a resident and a tax resident. It's actually two different things. Tax residency and actual residency, two different things. One is regulated by the immigration department and the other one by the tax department. So in order to become a resident in Cyprus, effectively you should spend the majority of your time here, right? Once you do get the residency, and then, sorry, let me repeat that. Once you get the residency, then you can register to get tax residency. Like I said, two different things. To maintain your tax residency, normally, under normal circumstances, you need to remain in the island for more than 6 months. However, if you get the non-dom status, you could also keep traveling and maintain your tax residency as long as you maintain a property here full time. You don't spend, you spend 60 days here in Cyprus, so we could round out that and say 2 months. You spend at least 2 months a year in Cyprus, and you don't spend more than 6 months in any other single country. So if you go to 4 countries and you spend 2-3 months in each, or if you go to 2 countries and you spend 5 months in each, is not a problem. But if you spend more than 6 months in another country, effectively that country could claim you as their tax resident. And if there is a dispute, there is not much Cyprus can do, because if they said, he only spent 2 months in Cyprus and the other one spent 6 months, then they say it's ours. So, like I said, maintain the property here. Having an active business obviously is a plus, but it depends. You could also, like I said, be self-employed. Spend 60 days minimum in Cyprus, not spend more than 6 months in another country in a calendar year.
So before we come to the last part and before we talk about the myths and mistakes, let's quickly mention the question as well, the potential exit tax. So when talking about leaving your country, wherever you are, and coming to Cyprus, is there a taxation that basically must be paid for everything that I own? For, let's say, my fortune or my net worth in general, or the net worth of the company that I own?
Okay, so I cannot comment on every country out there. Every country has different rules. So, and it's not possible for me to know all the tax rules in every country. What I do know, and this is a very specific to Germany, is that and we do get a lot of clients from Germany. There is 2 things to have in mind, and they're both very relevant. One has to do with the exit tax and the other with the wealth tax. So one, we know that an exit tax is coming. So effectively that means if you grew up in Germany and then you want to move out, then Germany will tax you and say, since you're moving out and I'm not going to be making money off you anymore, then I want a big lump sum right now based on ABC. I don't know what the criteria are. But we see a lot of people rushing to get out of Germany right now because there is also rumors of another tax, the wealth tax. So it means if you have money and that money is sitting, whether it's properties or cash or investments or companies, effectively you will be taxed every year. So we see a lot of people trying to go out before either of these 2 is implemented. Actually, exit tax, if I'm not mistaken, it should have been implemented at the beginning of this year, so at the beginning of 2020, but it was postponed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, certain countries do have an exit tax. You should, of course, check with the tax advisor there, and if you're going to make the move so that you make it right. It's not about just living before it happens, but it's also doing things right, because if you move and then you do things wrong, it could be that you pay more than a regular exit tax. So tax advisor back home, it is highly recommended before such a thing is implemented. Like I said, exit tax or wealth tax.
I'm actually very happy to not have all this hassle and chaos at the moment, because I moved here very early and I even incorporated my company earlier than that. So I established everything before times were a little bit more difficult, but you mentioned that the exit tax should be in place since 2020, but you meant 2021 this year, right?
No, I actually meant 2020. It was supposed to be in effect 1st of January 2020, and because of the COVID pandemic, they moved it on. They say the new date is 1st of January 2021, but honestly, no one knows. It could be earlier, it could be later.
I also read a lot of articles about that at the moment. I'm also in a Facebook group about people from Germany specifically living in Cyprus, and we regularly talk about this topic just for the people that are also in the group but not in Cyprus yet, to always keep them updated. Now we are coming to the last part of this video, and that is basically 5 things that a lot of people do wrong, especially if they come here to Cyprus, and that also can lead to a large amount of money that they have to pay but could be prevented. So for everybody watching this video, we are getting very, very valuable now, so definitely keep watching. And let's start with the first point, and that is that we also briefly talked about in the beginning, and that is that a lot of people forget that Cyprus is not a tax haven, and a lot of people think that they come here and they pay no taxes, and this maybe gives them problems in their calculations. So let's also quickly talk about that again.
Okay, so effectively there is a lot of tax havens out there. Surprisingly, most of them are islands such as Cyprus. I don't know why, but yeah. So the thing is, Cyprus is not a tax haven. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a normal tax system with quite a lot of taxes. The reason that it makes sense for non-doms is because then certain parts of the tax go away, which gives significant benefits. So this is very, very important thing to remember. Now, I would like to touch a little bit on the tax havens as well, though, because the problem is we do get clients that are trying to leave tax havens and come to Cyprus. The reason is this: you go to a tax haven, let's say, for example, Seychelles, right, or Belize or BVI Islands, and then you amass wealth there, and then you have that money, you can spend them, but you don't want to just spend them. You want to make investments. And then you go to another country, let's say within the EU, and you want to buy, I don't know, properties for rental, maybe a hotel, maybe invest in a business. And then when they make the KYC and the due diligence, they see the money comes from a tax haven, then the banks say, no, we don't want this money. So if you do amass wealth and then you cannot use it, it's not really a great idea. It's not something that you can easily leave to your children and invest and make more money and sit back and relax. What you could do is have a credit card, and then you can go and spend, and you can go constantly on holidays and so on, but you cannot make investments. So the reality is, tax havens, you can make a quick buck, if you ask me, because you're saving on the taxes, which means give you more money to reinvest within your company. Let's say if you're doing e-commerce and you use a tax haven, but then if you want to exit that and you want to do something more, and if you want to sell the company, and you face problems because of the due diligence and such. So Cyprus not being a tax haven, for me, is actually a big advantage.
I find it very important that you mentioned that, because I see a lot of people on YouTube, on websites that describe Cyprus as a tax haven, and also they emphasize the possibility of doing such things. But it is also important to know the side disadvantages of this procedure. So if the decision is of course yours, and we don't want to say you should do or should not do anything in this video, but definitely be aware, and that's why we are here, to give you a transparent overview about this topic. Let's talk a little bit about a very, very popular topic that I also regularly see comments about, and that is crypto and Forex. I know it is very new topic, especially crypto, of course. So what are the mistakes that people do in regards to these two topics in specific?
Okay, well, basically, there is a very favorable system when it comes to Forex and stocks and shares trading in Cyprus. So a very common mistake that we see is that people, they try to do it on the company, when actually it makes more sense to do that personally. Now, if you have funds sitting in a company and you want to invest them and then you want to keep them inside and benefit from the profit, then that might make sense. But if you have, let's say, 100,000 or 1 million and you want to do stocks trading or Forex trading, etc., then it wouldn't make sense to open a company to do it. You should keep it personally and do the trading that way. This is a very, very common question that we get. Now, I would not want to touch details on why it makes sense or not. It's a bit more complicated subject, so I would prefer to leave that to a tax advisor. So if someone is interested, of course, we could connect them to one. But I would like to also touch the part that you said about crypto. Crypto is currently not regulated in Cyprus. So effectively, it's accountants and tax advisors and lawyers currently treat it the same way that they treat Forex and stocks and shares. So it is a very beneficial thing to do in Cyprus, especially since there is no capital gains tax on it. But this will change in the future. We don't know how yet. We know that the government has formed a committee and they're into discussions. There are two major points that they're trying to not points, let's say decision that they're in a dilemma to on how to make. One of them is the one option they're considering is keeping it at 0% tax. So if that's the case, you could come in Cyprus, you could cash out the crypto and pay zero tax. Of course, it would come with rules. The same thing like we have with non-dom, for example, you need to have a residence here. It could be that they say you need to have something additional, right? Or maybe they say you have to have, maybe you have to own a property, same way like they do with the permanent residency. We still don't know, but that's one idea where they have certain rules you have to, or criteria, let's say, that you have to meet, and then you get 0%. Then the other scenario that is very favorable and they're considering is that they do have a fixed rate for cashing out crypto and paying tax. And the number that we keep hearing is 5%. So they say 5% is not such a big number where it would make it attractive, but also the fact that there will be a tax on it, it would make it more legitimate. So we don't know where it's going to end up. Currently is obviously more favorable because you don't have a taxation, but also because it's not regulated. It's very hard to have, let's say, a promise on something that is not written down. So when there is new taxes, when the new taxes are being introduced and we know more, of course we expect that the government will make the right choice and they will make a favorable scheme where it would enable people to come in Cyprus and enjoy their profits from crypto.
Yeah, and as we are both invested in crypto as well, and we are both very enthusiastic about this topic, we and you in specific, of course, will get informed as soon as there is a change in place. And if you want to get news about this topic, definitely make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you will get the latest news about any changes in the future. Let's talk about something that we also talked a little bit about earlier, and that is not spending enough time in Cyprus. So I think a big mistake is that people come here, incorporate their company, and then they leave. They just issue invoices from wherever they are, and they don't spend the 60 days that they have to spend here. Is that something that you also see a lot of people do, and is that something that people should be aware of very much, or how is this mistake in place?
Well, first of all, let's say that non-dom was a very big blessing because of the 60-day rule. Effectively, as many people know, especially if they're digital nomads, the digital nomad part that where everyone enjoys is the location independent. However, you cannot be truly location independent because of not having a financial base. I know people that they kept traveling and they didn't pay taxes, and they said, as long as I don't stay in one place for a lot of time, I don't pay taxes. And then at some point they decide that they want to settle down or start a company or do an investment, and then suddenly, where is your last tax submission? I don't have one since 2017. And then they face really big problems because it's not possible not to have a base. Also, we see people getting tired from moving from one spot to another, and then they want a base to leave their stuff. So when Cyprus came and they introduced non-dom, and the 60 days actually accidentally, because it wasn't made for digital nomads, but when they introduced this, it was actually a very good solution for digital nomads. Some of them said, well, as long as I maintain the property, I don't even need to come in Cyprus, nobody will check. Our advice is always against this, of course. I mean, we heard this story before. I actually don't know any of my clients that did so. All clients at Hugo, thank God, when we talked about this, they actually followed the advice. Do spend the 60 days in Cyprus. Cyprus is a beautiful island. We have very nice nature. We have great seafront. We have great mountains, great hiking trails. There is very nice restaurants by the sea.
Absolutely.
And in town there is the old town, there is the wineries and the Turtle Beach and everything. You know, there is so much things to do. 60 days in Cyprus is not enough. But if you want to move around, then do spend the 60 days in Cyprus. And we also, this is not a mistake or a myth or something, but we did get a lot of people who said, I want to come in Cyprus, stay the 60 days and then move around. And then they fall in love with the place and they actually stay longer. So definitely I would say to whoever wants to get the non-dom, do not make the mistake of staying less than 60 days.
Exactly.
The benefit is so good. When it comes to the taxes, it would be not so smart to abuse it and risk to lose the benefit, but also take advantage of the time that you spend here. There is so many nice things to do. Even here at the space that we're sitting now, there is such a big community with entrepreneurs, networking alone.
Absolutely.
And hanging out and, I don't know, playing beach volley together, futsal, hiking, yoga, anything, you know, there is so many things to do. 60 days is not that much.
Yes. And something that comes along with that is also to not spend, as we said, more than 6 months in another country. I think this is the much harder part for a lot of people, especially younger people that move out there from their home parents' house and they move to Cyprus, and then they basically miss, or they want to go back to Germany, and then they spend unfortunately 8 months or more in Germany, and then they don't get the benefits in Cyprus anymore. Before we come to the very last point, I want to talk about something that I just realized or found out very recently by you, funny enough, and that is the provisional tax. I also got an email a couple of days ago about this from my accounting, and that is called the provisional tax. What is it, and what are the things that someone should be aware of when talking about this topic?
All right, before I touch what it is, I would like to say that the most common problem with provisional tax, like you said, you only became aware of it recently, is that a lot of people, when they're incorporating, because they're not asking the right questions, because they don't know the right questions, not because they're making a mistake, they never find out about this. So usually a lot of accountants or tax advisors, they either don't, I wouldn't want to say on purpose don't answer that, but maybe they forget to mention this. But in Cyprus, corporate tax is prepaid. So this is what we call provisional tax. And what happens is that in the summer, you come and say, until the end of the year, I estimate that I will have so much profit. So this will be the tax that I have to pay, right? And then the government says, okay, so now give me 50% of that. And then in December, close to the end of the year, but before actually closing of the year, so there might be some things pending, you still haven't done your financial statements and so on, so you don't know 100% what is going to be the final value, but you can also come and correct this, right? And say, okay, so this is my estimate, my new estimate now, right? And pay the rest of the 50%. Now, funnily enough, if you overpay this, you actually get interest, and then will be a deduction from your next tax. If you underpay, then, and there is obviously a margin, so you can have a mistake of up to 30%, I think. I'm not sure on the right number, don't quote me on it, but of course there is a margin. You don't need to be exact, okay? But if you're close to it, then that's it. You paid your tax, and then if there is a small difference, you just pay the difference with no penalty. But if you were very below the number on the difference, you actually pay 10%. There is also many businesses that they intentionally don't pay any provisional tax, and then they pay the 10% penalty on the full amount. So for example, like I said, corporate tax is 12.5%. If you don't pay anything, then you will have 1.25% extra tax to pay at the end of the year. Now, if you have an e-commerce or a SaaS or a digital business, and then you're making money on advertising, and maybe instead of paying that money to the government, I mean the full tax of 12.5% provisionally, you could choose that you keep the money, continue with the advertising, make more money. Let's say you make 30%, and then instead of paying 12.5%, you actually pay 13.75, right? If that's the case, then it makes sense. Obviously, this you should discuss with your tax advisor. They will guide you. But yeah, the important thing that almost no one knows in the beginning is that provisional tax is there. And we've had clients that moved from other agencies, and they came to us and they say, what? I've never heard about this. Or they actually moved because of this, because they said, oh, I knew that I had to pay 12.5 and now suddenly I need to pay 13.75, and my provider never notified me. So yes, provisional tax exists. You need to pay it in advance. You pay it two times, once in the summer. So it's usually end of July, beginning of August, and the other one is end of the year in December. So yeah, that is provisional tax, and it's good for people to know about it. It doesn't make a huge difference in the operations of the company, but obviously if you don't know it, and if there is a penalty, or if it's a surprise, it's not a good surprise.
This was the perfect transition to the last point, and that is everything that we just talked about can get very complex, and also the fact that we are living in a Greek speaking country. You can get a lot of problems if you want to do everything on your own. So we decided to say that the last mistake a lot of people do is to try to do everything on their own. From my own experience, this wouldn't even be possible. If someone wants to come here and he would want to save the incorporation taxes, would it be possible for someone to do it completely on their own, or would you advise to take the step and just get an advisor and talk to a lawyer, accountant, consultant, whatever?
Well, obviously I'm a consultant too, so it's a bit of a biased answer, but yeah, you should get a consultant. Now, I would like to touch on what you said, that it's almost impossible to do things on your own. There are certain things that is impossible to do on your own, and there is certain things that you can do on your own, but you really don't want to. Okay, so for example, registering a company, it's impossible to do on your own. Yes, you can find the procedure online, but there is two documents that need to be drafted by a lawyer and signed by a lawyer. That's the Articles of Association and Memorandum of Association, which means that you as a person cannot do on your own. If a company has an internal legal advisor, maybe that's possible. I am not sure, but effectively that needs to be signed by a lawyer. So if you wanted to register a company completely on your own, the answer is no, you cannot do it. Now, I do know that at some point you tried to do social insurance on your own, and I know that's really not such a pleasant experience. It goes the same with immigration, VAT registration. Tax registration maybe is a bit easier, but also all these processes, if you try to do them on your own, there is two things that you will face. One is the problem with the Greek language, as you said. Many times the form can only be found in Greek, or the public servant or employee that is serving you, maybe their English is not the best, and then they end up being not so patient trying to explain you if you don't understand what they say. So the third and most important barrier, though, is that the lack of knowledge. If I know how to do something and I've done it 100 times, I can do it a lot easier than you would do. So let's say immigration. And it's not always the case, but in most cases with immigration, we go there, and now especially with the situation of the political system out there and the refugees that we get in Cyprus, and they come here and they seek political asylum and such. If you go to immigration, there is like huge queues outside, people screaming and shouting, and it's a very unpleasant experience. Now, I have personally been at the immigration with clients to help them out many times, and when we know how to do the process is done easy. But if someone tries to do it on his own and there is a chaos outside, it's not even the fault of the immigration officers or the immigration department, it's just that outside the immigration department it's literally a chaos, then it's a very difficult process. Additionally, you get the list. Specifically immigration, you can get everything in English as well, which is a plus, but then you go there and you make a mistake. And then they say, go out and come back. And then it will take you longer and longer time. I've known people that they missed, like I said earlier, you should register ideally before 1st of July, mid of the year is a very critical line. So they say, okay, I'm gonna go to immigration, and let's say my appointment is on 10th of June. And then you fail your appointment. The next appointment you can get is after a month. Effectively could cost you more than hiring a professional to assist you, whether that would be me or someone else. The recommendation is do get a consultant, focus on what makes you money and not saving money. Obviously, I know if someone is starting, it might be the case that they're trying to save money, but the ideal scenario is work, make money, pay someone to do the job for you. It's going to be a smoother experience, it's going to be nicer.
Absolutely.
You also have the personal experience and you know how it is. It's not, like I said, certain things is impossible to do them alone, certain things you can do them alone, but you really don't want to.
And I also just like the feeling of sending an email, and I know that someone that knows what he's doing is taking care of anything that I want to get done. Mm-hmm. So this is definitely something very important that everybody should know. And I think we came to an end now, to a very smooth end. And I really, really want to thank you for your time here. I think this was super valuable. I think a lot of people will know much more that they knew before starting to watch this video. And if anybody has some questions, they could leave a comment down below, and Nicolas and me, we will be happy to answer them. If someone wants to get in personal contact with Nicolas, this is of course possible as well. Just reach out to me and I will introduce you to him. And if you want to watch more of these kinds of videos, definitely make sure to subscribe to this channel, leave a like to this video, and we say thank you for watching until the end, and see you in the next video.